Hi, everyone. This is Hit and Hustle from irasportsdaily.com. I am Greg Flammang, and today we're going to touch on a lot of things within the Notre Dame football sphere regarding Marcus Freeman's press conference, Jarrett Patterson's injury and what that means, Xavier Watts moving to wide receiver, and and then probably maybe some recruiting with Keon Keeley and talk about that whole situation and what it means for the class and on and on and on. So and before I get going, I just want to mention that tomorrow, Jamie Uyama and I will be doing another live show. He is in South Bend right now, or he's at least traveling to South Bend. He's going to be on hand for the open practice tomorrow. And that's going to be a full practice that they're going to get to see and comment on. So once Jamie's done with that and writing up all his stuff, we're going to go live and we're going to talk about the practice and what he saw and everything. And we're going to break that all down. So you're going to want to tune in to us tomorrow as well. Be looking out for a show then. I'm not sure what time that's going to be. It kind of depends on where he is in terms of, when he gets everything written up and for the website and all that stuff. So be on the lookout for that. But okay, so let's talk about Jarrett Patterson first of all. So Marcus Freeman announced today that fifth-year senior left guard Jarrett Patterson has a sprained foot, and he's at least going to be kind of rested for the next 7 to 10 days, right? So I think the comment that he made in the press conference was pretty vague, right? Like sprained foot. What exactly does that mean? I thought it was telling when I think it was Pete Sampson from The Athletic. He asked the question of after the 7 to 10 days, like, what do you need to see? Because that's going to be a week. At that point, they're going to be a week out from Ohio State. And Pete Sampson from The Athletic asked him, what do you need to see from Jarrett Patterson at that point to feel confident that you could put him in the game? And Marcus Freeman said, pain tolerance. He mentioned pain tolerance, which to me, when you're talking about pain tolerance at that point, it's not about healing or it's not about, where he's recovered and that sort of thing. He just went straight to, is he able to deal with whatever the injury is, right? That is unspecified at this point, other than say foot sprain. To me, that's sounds like it's something that is going to be lingering, right, throughout the year. Because once the season starts, it's very hard to kind of heal up from, especially foot injuries, right? Because you're obviously on your feet all the time. And that's going to be just a hindrance for him all year. So that's something that is we're going to have to factor in. And the fact that he called it a pain tolerance thing, like, I understand it's up to Jarrett Patterson if he wants to kind of endure the pain and that sort of thing. But there is a performance aspect to pain tolerance as well, right? So I could be perfectly willing to play under whatever pain I endure, any whatever kind of pain that there is associated with the injury, right? But as an offensive lineman, and especially if you have an injury to your foot, right? Like your foot as a football player, period, like you want to be able to drive out, right? Like you want to be able to push off your feet and be explosive and that sort of thing. If you have a foot injury that you're dealing with, that just makes it a lot harder, right? It's just the same thing with Chris Tyree and his turf toe last year. Like he could be as determined as he wants to be, um, wanting to be out there to play, right? And they're willing to tolerate the pain. I still want to be out there to help my team and that sort of thing, and that's great, right? Like that we appreciate that in any kind of athlete, right? Like the determination to go out there and do it. But if he's unable to explode off of his foot, if he can't function the way that he needs to, then it may not be in his best interest. It may not be in the team's best interest to go out there and try to do it, right? Obviously, Marcus Freeman mentioned Andrew Kristofic and Rocco Spindler, who are now going to be taking reps with Jarrett Patterson out resting, which that's another thing that I'll get to in a second, because I think that's a kind of a hidden positive to this whole situation, is that those guys are now going to rep with the first team offense, right? And that's going to be to their benefit if it happens that Jarrett Patterson, can't endure or isn't at the level that he wants to be at to compete at the highest level that he can, right? So that's going to be beneficial to them. But to get back to Jarrett Patterson, it's not so much always with injuries. It's not the want to, it's just the ability to go out there and be at your best, right? You don't want to have to hurt the team, right? If you're laboring or if you can't be what you are, right? Anytime a player is injured, that compromises that player's ability to be the version of themselves that makes them a great player, right? Um, just like a perfect example is Braden Lindsey, right? Where he's a speed guy and he is his great quality is being able to take the top off the defense. And when you hurt your hamstring and the hamstring is compromised, like, yeah, you can go out there and still, I don't want to say limp around, but you can be 95% or 90% of what you are and be out there gutting it out for your team. But that's not what makes Braden Lindsey a great weapon. What makes him a great weapon is his long speed, right? And that's what affected him in 2020. And so this could be a similar thing for Jarrett Patterson. So, I know Marcus Freeman, he's not trying to take a shot at Jarrett Patterson. He's not trying to, challenge him to be tough and that sort of thing. But I do want to kind of, clarify and just make clear, like, someone's pain tolerance isn't the only consideration to them actually being in the lineup. If he can't be what his capabilities are, and if he's actually going to be lesser than someone like a healthy Andrew Kristofic or Rocco Spindler, that's what the move needs to be. And so I just want to make that clear. Like, if we don't see Jarrett Patterson suit up against Ohio State, it's not really a toughness thing. It could just be him fighting through an injury isn't the best option at left guard. So we're gonna time will tell on that. That's gonna be kind of a story that everyone's gonna be on top of for the next few weeks here, a couple weeks before Ohio State. But obviously, it's good news that it's not completely, he's going to be out for 9 weeks or 2 months or 3 months or the rest of the year or anything like that. Like, that's good news. He does have the option to play. But exactly what that looks like, we don't know yet. So that was the update on Jarrett Patterson that I wanted to touch on. And then I want to touch on Xavier Watts to wide receiver. So when the news broke about Avery Davis, Jamie Ueyama and I did a show, and we didn't advocate against Xavier Watts moving to wide receiver. I think we mostly just said it wasn't a sure thing. I was a little bit stronger against the idea because I didn't want him to sacrifice his future at safety. And it sounds to me like Marcus Freeman has prop bet bot explaining your choices. Robbie, I'll get to that. I think you might be talking about with single high for UHND. So actually clarify that question for me. I'm not totally sure what you mean by that. If you could clarify that. So I think Marcus Freeman found a go between, okay, they need a body at wide receiver, and especially then we saw Xavier Watts rep at practice. I think it was yesterday. He was repping with the wide receivers. And the thing to remember about yesterday's practice is that not Tobias Merriweather, Deion Colsey was out, and we knew that. He had the all right, Robbie, I'll get to that question because we did do that. Or actually, no, we didn't. I don't think we did the prop bet pod. So we're going to have to get to that. So thank you for reminding me. I'm going to have to talk to Frank about that. The prop bet pod. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, back to Xavier Watts. So he repped yesterday, but the thing to remember is we knew that Jaden Thomas, he was out that day. We knew that Deion Colsey was going to be out. So they were down wide receivers anyway, right? And I think Joe Wilkins is taking individual reps at this point, but I don't know that there's any team like 7-on-7, 11-on-11 stuff. So they were down wide receivers yesterday anyway. They needed a body to come in, and they needed a body to be out there. And I think what this is what they've carved out a situation where Xavier Watts is going to rep maybe on a like every other gay basis at wide receiver, in the event that they incur another injury or two, and then he needs to be called on to play offense. He's played offense before. He knows the offense, right? The one thing that hasn't changed is Notre Dame's offensive coordinator is a different position coach, obviously, which might be a benefit to Xavier Watts. And so there's that part of it. And also he's still, like today, Marcus Freeman said that Xavier Watts was repping at when they did the scrimmage, he was playing defense. So I think it's just to be I think they're covering their bases there. I don't think it's a permanent move. I think he's still going to be involved with defensive backs. I think his future at safety is still there. I think it's just a practical, at some point we might need an extra body at wide receiver, and we have a former wide receiver on the roster, which he's going to work on some things. And then, so that's where that is, right? So that's important development. Personally, I think that's fine. I think that I think it's funny that last year I kept calling for Kyle Hamilton to be used on offense, and people said we can't take time away from him on defense to play on offense. And lo and behold, they are cross-training safety to play wide receiver. And not only that, but they have Brandon Joseph returning punts. And so I took a lot of heat for that last year, and I was not wrong. It can be done, and it should have been done. I'm a little mad about it, but that's fine. No big problem. All right, so let's see. I have a question here. I think this is in regard to Billy Strouth. Has a long history of playing freshman interior offensive lineman early. He actually does not have that history. Famously, he did not play Quentin Nelson. I think you might be thinking of Robert Hainsey, who he played, I guess. Well, okay. There's Steve Elmer as well. I believe he played as a freshman. And then there's Robert Hainsey, who plays a right tackle. So I don't know. I guess you could call that a long history if you want. Either way, I don't see that being the case this year, just because there are so many other options interior wise at this point, right? So you have Christophic, who played last year. You have Rocco Spindler, who played. I think Carmody's also played guard. So that's also an option. So they have a lot of ways to go. I mean, shoot, you could kick inside Blake Fisher if you wanted. So so I don't. It would have to be a situation where Billy Strouth is just completely blowing people away, and that's not something we've heard. Not to say it isn't happening, but we haven't heard that. So that's something to, I guess, monitor. But yeah, I don't see Billy Strouth being a big factor at this point. So let's see other tidbits from Marcus Freeman's presser. He touched on kicking. Someone asked a question about kicking, and it seems like Blake Grupe is going to be the guy. Marcus Freeman said he was 3 for 4 today, missed a 53-yarder, and made a 53-yarder with an addition to other two. I think the speculation was Blake Grupe might have been the short field goal guy, and Josh Bryan would have been the longer field goal guy. If Blake Grupe is attempting 50-plus yard field goals in practice, then I think that's a pretty good indication that it's just going to be his job straight away. And that's something that people have been really questioning, showing concern about for good reason, right? We haven't really seen the kickers at all. The media hasn't seen the kickers at all, but we've just been going off of Marcus Freeman and what little he's talked about it. We know Brian Mason is going to be talking to the media tomorrow, in addition to probably the kickers. So we're going to get a little bit more clarity there. Marcus Freeman did highlight his consistency this offseason. Now, what does that mean, right? There's consistency, and then there's this is what the numbers are, right? And I think that's probably the most important thing. There is a little bit of, it's good to see the ball come off the foot and that sort of thing, but Look, in my opinion, if he was like, I don't know, 20 of 25 in camp, right? I think we'd hear that, and the fact that we haven't is indication of something, right? So that'll, hopefully, hopefully be something that we figure out tomorrow. Very Piety is in the chat. Brendan, how you doing, bud? Obviously, you probably have some questions, so fire those away if you want. I will answer them to the best of my ability. Robbie points out that Very Piety Brendan McAlinden is the meme lord, and that is true. That is true. And if you're lucky enough to be in the DMs, there's memes that he makes that aren't public that are fantastic as well. So that's a fun thing. All right, let's go over some other press conference tidbits. Logan Diggs, the red jersey's coming off next week, which is a great sign. I've been dubious of how much he can actually play against Ohio State, but if the red jersey's coming off, then it's a pretty good sign that he's going to get work in that game. Now, today, Marcus Freeman also said today was the last day of camp that they were going to take off, or that they were going to take back to the ground. Which I don't think you would really want to test Logan Diggs in that way, given the shoulder injury, right? Like, you don't want to expose him to hits when you don't have to. Dylan McCullough mentioned yesterday, like, they do want to see him take contact before they put him in a live game. So how they juggle that, in my opinion, if the red jersey's off, if it's healthy, Logan Diggs said the shoulder's 100% healed yesterday. If that's really the case, then it should be he should get time against Ohio State. He should get touches, and he should be a factor. I've been skeptical, but I think it's time to stop being skeptical of that. It just seems like it's going to happen, which is a huge thing for the offense, right? Jamie and I talked about with Avery Davis going down, you're going to want to see a lot more two backs. You're going to a lot more two back stuff. 21 personnel with a receiver or a running back motioning out into the slot, and that opens up a lot of things for the offense, and it best utilizes the weapons that you have, right? So that's how you mitigate Avery Davis, mostly, right? Like, obviously you move Xavier Watts, you get him some reps there, but I think the coaches would much rather have Logan Diggs out there, or Chris Tyree out there, Audric Estime. And speaking of Estime, C-Mac asked another question: is Estime going to be a workhorse back this season? That remains to be seen exactly how they get used. It's a total guess on my part. Here's the thing, though, that I've kind of noticed about all the backs is that's a hungry room, and it's a very confident room. I mean, Logan Diggs wants the red jersey off right now. He wants it off. Audric Estime is talking about, before the season started, he's talking about, winning the Doak Walker, right? Which is obviously a little bit of hyperbole on that part, on his part, but at the same time, it just speaks to how confident he is about how much he wants the ball. He wants to be a workhorse back, right? So that's what you want to see. And obviously Chris Tyree is going to be very heavily involved. So look, that position is really is getting healthier, and the backs are just like, it's a very, very confident group, very hungry group. And that's obviously what you want, right? You want guys who are chomping at the bit to be out there and to be a big part of the offense and that sort of thing. So that's exactly what you want. See, KH14 wins the Blitnikoff and Thorpe Awards last year. But obviously that's true. I think that's undeniable. And so let me just, okay, right. So if they had played him for the first 6 games, wins the Thorpe, wins the Blitnikoff, and then he gets hurt. Let's say he still gets hurt, and then they have him in that coaching role, wins the Broyles. So you would have had a Blitnikoff, a Thorpe, and the Broyles for best assistant coach in the nation. And I think that was there, and they didn't have the vision, and that's unfortunate. So yeah, that's opportunity missed is what I would say to that. If you had to pick one Notre Dame running back for college fantasy football, who are you going with? Same question. I assume this year. Thomas, tell me if it's points per reception. If it's PPR, because if it is, then I would say Chris Tyree. That's what I would say. Although it's kind of tough, right? So let's think. I haven't played fantasy football in a really long time, so I'm a little rusty with how I think about these things. But okay, so Chris Tyree, if it's a PPR league, you go Chris Tyree, because you get the receptions, you get the carries, you get the running back stuff, obviously. But is he going to be on the goal line? All right, so let's PPR, right? So let's just assume half-point PPR. I would go Chris Tyree then. I think he's going to get the most snaps. I think if you get the most run, and then you just hope the touchdowns will flow from that. That's what I would do. I think guaranteed work plus the PPR situation. That's what I would go with. Robbie agrees. He says it's got to be Chris Tyree. All right, so let's move into real quickly. Let's move on to Keon Keeley real quick. So replacements. First of all, I would direct everyone to irishsportsdaily.com. Matt Freeman had a good write-up on this. Here's the thing with the replacements. Okay, it's kind of like the Dante Moore situation, frankly, where you lose Dante Moore, that situation falls apart. They offered Austin Novosad. He gave them a look, and then he ultimately stayed with Baylor, right? Then you move on to Kenny Minchie. We don't know if he's going to visit, if he isn't, or whatever. And that situation is kind of unclear. But the point is that when you're on someone like Keon Keeley and Dante Moore, I mean, Keon Keeley had been committed for over a year. Okay. If he's been committed for over a year, you're not talking to, you're talking to defensive ends, but not like the guys, right? Like the guys that you would consider to be high impact recruits. And if those guys aren't being spoken to, then they're speaking to other teams. And then, you're just losing time. You're not building relationships. And that's the one thing that Notre Dame needs. Notre Dame needs to be building relationships. I mean, that's Marcus Freeman's whole thing. I mean, the whole difference between Marcus Freeman and Brian Kelly is that Marcus Freeman is going to be involved and he's going to be personally recruiting players and that sort of thing. But Marcus Freeman's been spending all his time cultivating and building the relationship with Keon Keeley. And the difference between Notre Dame and, let's say, Texas A&M or Alabama, for that matter, or Georgia, is you can't swoop in and mitigate the lack of a relationship with money. Okay. Now, I don't want to speak out of turn regarding NIL stuff. Okay. I don't. But the facts are what they are. Okay. You have Keon Keeley, who has been committed to Notre Dame for a year, right? Obviously, if you're committed for that long, then it's not a distance thing. Okay. It's not a fit thing, right? Like everybody talked to him when he's a Notre Dame kid, right? This is a Notre Dame kid, loves Notre Dame. Okay, fine. They haven't played any games, and all you've done is basically added Al Washington, who already had a previous relationship. You have Marcus Freeman, who is your defensive coordinator. So the head coach, you have Al Washington. My point that I'm making is Notre Dame has not changed in the last 3-4 months. Notre Dame has always, whatever he committed to, Notre Dame is the same program, if not adding on to that, right? They've added a great defensive line class around him, one of the best they've ever had. So to me, now you're to the point where I'm leaving the class and it's like I'm not even an option anymore. That to me is telling, right? Like what could it be that is different? There aren't very many things. Alabama's still the same school as well. Ohio State's still the same school, right? They didn't have traction then. Something has happened. Okay. I'm not going to say it's NIL, but there aren't that many other options, right? Again, we're not playing games. There's no negative look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the same school you committed to. So something's up, right? And so I think that because of that, Notre Dame can't just swoop in and overcome the lack of a relationship. Look at Texas A&M. They're trying to get Malachi Nelson. They haven't been talking to Malachi Nelson at all, but they don't have a quarterback, and they need a quarterback in the class. How are they going to mitigate that relationship gap? With money, right? That's just logic. It's not even like a complicated thing. It's not a conspiracy. There's one thing, right? So, look, I'm not even saying it's wrong, right? Like, it's just the way it is. It's just a fact. Notre Dame is not playing that game. They are not going to come with the bag. And frankly, I don't even know how I feel about that. Like, do we? It's not like it's illegal, right? It's not like Texas A&M's not getting busted for anything. Oregon's not getting busted for anything. Miami's not getting busted for anything. No one's getting busted for anything. I mean, this is out in the open. So that is what it is. But the point is, so to get back to the other point, is that it's now you're trying to make up distance with other defensive ends when you haven't been talking to other people. You haven't been talking to defensive ends, right? And that's the problem. And I think Travis makes a comment that, I mean, pay them, get them here, and mold them into Notre Dame men. Here's the thing. Keon Keeley, they've decided that he was a Notre Dame guy, right? And he was. We've been told over and over again. So if he's a Notre Dame guy, then find a way to get him on campus. Like, if Notre Dame's NIL game was even close to Bama or Ohio State, no one's getting talked out of coming to Notre Dame. Why would a parent do that? You get everything. You get the money, you get the education, and you get the football. Like, no one would talk their child out of that, right? There would be no reason. But now they do have a reason. There is a mitigating factor, and that's just true. So if that's Notre Dame's choice, and that's Notre Dame's choice, it's not a big deal to me. Or it's not that it's not a big deal. It's just a fact. Like, that's what they're doing. It's no big problem. But this is going to be an issue going forward because, I mean, you see, like, that's how it works in pro sports, right? I mean, sometimes players take less to be in a situation that they deem more desirable, but more often than not, they just go to the highest offer. So that's just is what it is. So, as far as Keon Keeley, good luck to him. It's not the first time anyone's ever decommitted from Notre Dame. It's obviously brutal for the class. Can't replace him, right? That's why he was such a big commit. You can't replace that. You can't replace 6'5", 250 or whatever it is and flying around the end. So people think he's the best player in the country. It's a huge loss. It's irreplaceable. So that's the way it goes. It's a bummer. All right, let's see. All right, Brennan's got. Oops, that's not Brennan. Here we go. Thank you for saying I nailed it, though. I appreciate that. All right. Holistically, which do you prefer, 12 or 21 personnel? Does Buckner impact your selection? So for this team, I holistically prefer 21 because I think you want to be more dynamic, and I think having the extra back instead of the extra tight end, that makes it, Rob, Is this Josh? Robbie says it's 21 with a fullback, but I think that might be Josh. Josh has a burner. There's no way. I'm not convinced. All right, 12 or 21 personnel. Does Buckner impact your selection? A little bit. So I would rather because in a way, you have two backs in the backfield, but essentially you have three, because Buckner, it can be a runner, especially down at the goal line, right? Like you're in a heavy formation, even because look, essentially, right? Like we think of 20 well as a shotgun with split backs. You motion one out, and now you're at basically 4 wide. But so basically you could essentially be in 10, right? But 21 personnel is just like, that's, if you're in the I formation, like that's 21, right? Like you have one tight end, 2 wide receivers, 2 backs, right? So anytime, like Lou Holtz was in 21 personnel all the time. And so that was his thing. So you can be a power team out of 21 just as well as you can be a power team out of 12, right? So I think people think of it as size, but really what you're doing, in my opinion, at least in 2022, 2023 might be different when Holden Stays and Eli Raridan are into their sophomore years. That's when I think that could blow up a lot more. But in 2022, I would rather have either the Chris Tyree, Logan Diggs, or Audric Estime out there, rather than on a more regular basis, rather than Eli Raridan or Holden Stays or Kevin Bauman or Crane Barong or whoever, right? Like I would rather have the backs out there, because you can still split one of them out, and you have Buckner with either Tyree, Estime, or Diggs, and you're essentially still in a 2-back set. You can still run 2 backs that way, because Buckner's a big boy. That's 6'1", 215. I mean, that's a big kid, right? It also spreads out the defense, gets the defense. You split out a back, gets a linebacker out of there, right? And that really helps. So I want the field to be spread for Buckner. I think that's the best way for him to operate. I think that he is a dynamic player, and if you spread people out with him, he can hurt you. Yeah, look, I did the whole video on Buckner. If you haven't watched it, you're watching the show, you haven't watched it, it's on our YouTube page. It's Tyler Buckner Expectations. Find it and watch it, and watch the high school film. I put up the high school film, and people forget how dynamic of a football player he is. I mean, that kid, you spread the field out and you give him options, he is going to hurt you. And that was why he was recruited. And people forget that he was a 5-star quarterback. And I said it before, the Elite 11 camp was brutal for his reputation. And then COVID hit, and you didn't get to actually play games. I think that hurt him. So that's how I feel. That's how I feel about 12 versus 21. I think they're both going to be viable. I think they'll both play. But I think they'll both be big factors this year. But I prefer 21 personnel just based on like the skills or the weapons that Notre Dame has this year. Vamos Irish, he's obviously listened to the single high pod I recorded with Frank, where I said wings are overrated, and I believe that to be true. There's not enough meat for the sides, and I agree that the flavors can be great, but there's not enough meat on wings. There's too much bones, and I don't want to sit there and have to pick through bones for 30 minutes, right? I would rather just eat something straight. And that is how I feel about it. The best sauce for wings, it depends, right? Like generally speaking, I would go ranch. I'm a big ranch guy. I love ranch dressing. There are some I don't know what's going on in this chat. I'm a big ranch guy. There are some blue cheese companies that I would prefer. Like some blue cheese is like blue cheese is kind of hit or miss. Ranch is a little bit more safe, and that's what I'm into. So, let's see. Travis says, I like Tyree Slot, Diggs, or Estime in backfield with Lorenzo and Lindsey wide, Mayer, and the option of Buckner running back. Yeah. I mean, that's how it is, right? So you can look, you can run for power, you can spread out and do the you could run for power, you can spread out and do zone read, you can do a whole bunch of things, wide receiver bubbles, wide receiver screens, all those things. And so it's a big deal. Ranch is not a sauce. It is to me, Michael. How dare you? I do live in Big Ten country now. I am in Big Ten country, and my friend Michael can attest to that. This is where 3 yards in a cloud of dust is born here now. And so that's where I am. All right, let's go to Keenan. It's a good question. Keys to the game versus OSU. All right, so I talked about this a little bit on the single high pod too. So here's the thing that people don't really factor in as much when thinking about Ohio State. Because everyone thinks, okay, you keep their offense off the field, you got to slow them down to win and that sort of thing, and you got to control the ball, right? Keep them off the field. Well, in their 2 losses last year, Ohio State led time of possession. Neither team, neither Oregon or Michigan had the ball for more than 30 minutes, right? So Ohio State led time of possession, and Ohio State ran more plays than both of those teams. They had 85 plays to Michigan 73, and I think they had 79 plays to Oregon 61. They had 611 yards against Oregon total offense. Okay. It's not that you can it's hard to completely slow down an offense like this. Okay. Because they just have some coaches and some systems are just designed to move the ball, right? And that's just the way it is, right? And essentially to stop them, you kind of have to hope that you are they're having a bad game or something like that, right? And it's not that Notre Dame can't, right? It's not like they can't force them to do that, right? And I think of all the coaches that Notre Dame could have gotten to coach the defense, I think specifically against Ohio State, I think Al Golden is one of the best ones they could have gotten because he just came from the NFL where a lot of offenses are played similar to the way Ohio State plays in terms of spreading it out and opening things up for the quarterback, right? And I think with the sim pressures that Al Golden can bring, with his ability to, I think it's totally instructive the way that Cincinnati last year adjusted to what Kansas City was doing in the playoffs, right? Now, obviously, Al Golden is not the defensive coordinator. Okay, he was not, but he was a part of that staff, and he knows how they adjusted, right? And he clearly had some input into it, right? So they were able to figure out how to slow them down and keep them out of the end zone. People forget it's not that the Chiefs didn't move the ball in that game, is that they couldn't get into the end zone. And that was what the key was for Oregon and for Michigan. Ohio State was moving the ball against both of those teams. The problem was when they got into the red zone, they didn't score touchdowns. Okay. And part of that too is make sure they get into the red zone. Stop them before they get into the end zone, right? Like 75-yard touchdown pass, no good, right? I mean, it's self-evident, right? But at the same time, you don't let a team into the end zone and you make them score from the red zone. And when you do that and you can keep them out, that's how you win the game. Okay. They were 2 of 3 in the red zone against Oregon. Oregon was 4 of 4 for 4 touchdowns. Okay. The Oregon won by 7. You stop them one time and it gets them going. Right. And so that's the key, in my opinion, is like, there's that, there is beating them up. It's being able to run the ball. That was another thing. Michigan ran for almost 300 yards. Okay. Oregon ran for, I think it was around 250, something like that. They outrushed them. They clearly outrushed them. That's the thing. Outrushed them have a better running game and then stop the run against them, and then keep them out of the end zone, right? Make them make them score from short yards, basically. None of the chunk stuff. Winning the turnover battle obviously helps, like it always helps, but that wasn't the story in either of those games. Okay, they turned the ball over once against Oregon, right? It was a 1-0 thing. Now, granted, it was kind of twice because they had the ball in the red zone and they went for it on 4th down. They didn't get it, right? So that's a turnover essentially. All right, so here's another thing. What are the odds? Super chat. Thank you, Ethan Kaufman. What are the odds Patterson and Diggs play week 1? I would say good. Patterson, Diggs, I think is a lock. Unless something happens between now and then, I think he's going to play. So that's I just think I think they're both going to be out there. And that's what I expect. I think Patterson is going to be geared. Here's the thing. If it's a pain tolerance thing for Patterson, he's playing in week 1. I just think that's what's going to happen. I think he's going to at least try. And then if he can't go after that, like the next 2 games, you have Marshall and Cal, maybe he'll shut it down then. But yeah, he's playing against Ohio State, in my opinion, without like a ton of, insight other than what Marcus Freeman said. Marcus Freeman said it's a pain tolerance thing. He's definitely going to try. There's no way he's not going to try, especially when Ohio State, post injury, that's probably the healthiest he's going to be, because once the season starts, then it's like, okay, you can't take 10 days off, or you can't take 2 weeks off or whatever in the middle of the year. So I think he's going to give it a go, no question. Brendan's been really good about researching Ohio State. Ohio State has never lost a football game where they scored 35 plus points, and are 168-2 when they have scored 30 plus. So look, keep them under 30, right? And that's where you have a chance. Robbie predicts 30-27. Not a bad prediction. Let's see. Always Irish had an idea, run the wing T for this game only for time possession. This would throw Suckeyes off. Imagine the Army and Navy. Don't love it, frankly. We don't need time of possession. That's the thing. It's not, you don't need to completely change what you are. You don't need to completely change what you are to beat them, right? Like Michigan didn't do that. Oregon didn't do that. Oregon just did their stuff, so you could when you start doing that sort of thing, like that's when you start telling your team, like, we're not good enough to beat them. We're going to throw out a gimmick. Like to me, that's kind of like, you don't do gimmick stuff, especially in week 1. Like, you need to be building your team, right? And I know that there's a lot of focus on Ohio State and everything, but you're building your team to be what you think is going to be championship caliber, right? You don't want to do gimmick stuff, because first of all, you're never going to master it. There's no time. You don't have enough time to master it. So there's that part of it. And so then you can't master it, and it sends a signal to your team that you don't have it. You're not good enough. So that's not something that I would do. Let's see. There's a lot of criticism of the Noles defense needing time to learn it to get it right. Is that the same for the Golden defensive schemes? No, because it's different, because Golden and Freeman, they're both multiple. Here's the thing. Freeman did a lot of sim pressures last year. The difference is doing it with Marist and like Botelho and like Prince Colley, right, is different than Bauer, Drew White, and J.D. Bertrand with a messed up wrist, right? Like that is the difference. Okay, they're good. My kids came out. They were had the look on their face, very concerned. So that's the difference, right? Where you are, you're adding the personnel that you need, and it's this extra set of eyes, right? So on the one hand, it's Marcus Freeman, and I think, he obviously is a very good defensive coordinator, and he knows what he's doing and that sort of thing. But now you have Freeman plus Al Golden to evaluate the game and any changes that need to go on, right? I think they are both going to. I think those two are going to have a really good chemistry, and so that's the thing. Al Golden is adding wrinkles to a defense that they're already running, where Knowles is coming in, changing things wholesale, right? And look, we saw that they brought in the nickel McAllister, right, from Oklahoma State, who, you know, was their nickel guy and that sort of thing, and he played in the slot all the time. You want someone in there who knows the defense, right? Well, Notre Dame fans should remember McAllister, because that was the guy that Lorenzo Styles was lighting on fire for that entire game, right? And if Jack Cohn hits him on that post route, he just overthrows him, then we're looking at like a 10-catch, 200-yard performance from Lorenzo Styles in that game against the person that Ohio State brought in. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit different, because I think Notre Dame's doing something similar. And I think, you know, Knowles is known for pressure, and he's going to bring pressure, and he's going to bring a lot of pressure. I think the fact that he doesn't have Malcolm Rodriguez is a big factor, right? Malcolm Rodriguez is a great football player. He did really well he's doing really well for the Lions right now. I think people are very excited about him. So that's a big part of, you know, what their defense was last year. And so, you know, obviously they have a bunch of great players at Ohio State in terms of the recruiting rankings, but they haven't played that great. And it might take a little bit, you know, And it is fortunate that at least Notre Dame got to see the structure of what Ohio State's going to be running in the bowl game, even though it wasn't Jim Knowles calling it. So it's a good question. Thank you for sending that over. Vamos Irish. Let me get this about that more. All right, let me see if we have another questions or comments here. Oh, Clarence. Oh. Notre Dame should win easily, according to most people on here. A great new head coach and new coaches, but as usual, we shall see final score and say what. Okay. I don't think anyone ever said Notre Dame should win easily. We were commenting on how Notre Dame could win the game and the things that they need to do. I don't know that even a prediction was made. And if you're mad that Notre Dame fans are trying to figure out the way that their team can win a game, then that's interesting. That you don't expect that to happen. So, okay, let's see if there's any more questions or comments that I have missed. And if not, we will call it a day. It looks like we're good. So thank you everyone for tuning in today to just talk about like the updates and everything. Like I said, tomorrow, Jamie and I are going to, we're going to be recording a show on practice and that sort of thing. We're going to be talking about what he saw and what he makes of everything. Joe Bro, thank you very much. Thank you for the great show comment. I appreciate those words. So yeah, subscribe to the show, like the show if you had a good time. We'll be doing one again, like I said, tomorrow. Hit up irishsportsdaily.com. There's a ton of updates on the site about today's press conference, today's interviews with the players, with Marcus Freeman, or not, maybe yesterday's interviews with the players, Marcus Freeman comments, recruiting and everything. Like I said, if you're curious about you know, Keon Keeley and everything, Matt had a really good update on the site, and I encourage everyone to go listen to that. I didn't want to talk too much about that today because that's his reporting, and so I want him to, you know, get the shine on that. So yeah, have a good Thursday, everybody, and we will talk to you very, very soon.